Hello friends, welcome to the channel. Bob here, and welcome to a video that's going to be a bit of a talkie with some gameplay in the background. I'm not playing at the same time as I'm recording, so maybe this video might be a bit more coherent than usual, but I can't guarantee it. So this video is going to be about playing MMOs in 2022. It's just in general how I'm playing them. This video has been inspired by a few questions that I've had. So I thought I would do a video about it because MMOs are in a strange position in 2022. We seem to be transitioning between how we've been playing MMOs for quite a number of years to how players think they want to play MMOs in 2022, and they're kind of backing all of these, so-called classically inspired MMOs that don't really feel that classic at all, actually, when you get down to it. But that's maybe a topic for another video. So yeah, MMOs seem to be in a bit of a transitional phase. Who knows how things will work out? People keep saying MMOs are dead, etc., etc., and whatever. But I'm sure that there's always going to be players around that love MMOs. I still love the genre, but I do have a number of issues with it at the moment, and I'm certainly not playing as many as I was. I kind of try to cut down on the amount of MMOs I'm playing. But anyway, yes, so playing MMOs in 2022. Well, I'll start off by talking a little bit about how I have always played MMOs and how it's changed a bit over the last couple of years. So if you're an old friend of the channel, you know that I solo quite a lot. Not always out of choice. I think some people kind of get the wrong impression sometimes that I'm kind of just antisocial. It's a combination of a number of things. It is being it is being, I guess, I don't like to use words to describe a thing. There's too much of that going on at the moment. You're this or you're that or whatever it may be. But I'm an introverted person, and I'm quite happy to get on in my own company. It's not a necessity. It's not essential. It's just that I am happy to do that, and I think that's part of why I kind of end up playing MMOs solo quite a lot, because I don't feel the need for there to be other people. Although if there are, that's great. It's just I think it's more of a habit thing where I log into an MMO and I've got things to do, and I'll just go ahead and do them rather than searching out for the social side of the game. The other thing is obviously being sick. It's difficult. It's difficult being social when you're sick in real life and in games. Quite often, when I log into a game, I've had people send me tells saying, "Do you want to do something?" And I've said no. And it's not because I didn't want to. It's just because quite often all I'm capable of when I log into a game is run. Literally, I log into if I'm not feeling very well. I log into New World. I press W and I press E. So I run around the world pressing W and I press E to farm nodes. That's all I do. That gets me through those days when things are not particularly well. But when I'm not particularly well. But the other thing as well is that sometimes when you're in a situation like I'm in, I know that there are a number of you who are in a similar situation. We've spoken about it before. Sometimes I just have to stop playing, and going through the process of finding a group, then travelling to the group, and then getting in the group, playing for half an hour, and then something, I get overwhelmed by sickness and I have to log off. That's not a situation that you kind of want to get into, really. I don't want to take that time and then get somewhere, but then most importantly let those people down, so they've got to then find someone else. So that's another reason why I quite often find myself playing MMOs as a single player experience. The other thing as well, I think what many people don't seem to talk about, and I've seen a few videos about this over the last few years about playing MMOs solo. One of the things that people don't seem to bring up is the fact that MMOs provide an experience that single player RPGs just don't provide. Basically, it's like if I think of EverQuest, like a dungeon crawling experience, playing an enchanter or a necro or whatever classes are suitable to do that solo. There isn't a single player RPG that gives you that same tactical or emergent experience from a gameplay point of view, really. Nothing to do with the social, just the actual mechanics and gameplay functionality of crawling a dungeon. When I think back to some of the early RPGs that I played, the Ultimas, the Gold Box, SSI stuff, Dungeon Master, Isle of Beholder, Baldur's Gate, moving forward to like Dragon Age, those kind of games, they offer they all offer a tactical combat experience in their own way, but there's still nothing that really comes close to an EverQuest experience, I don't think, because I think MMOs, like an MMO dungeon, is just designed in a different way, basically. The gameplay, it's more of a controlled random experience, in a sense that if I think of EverQuest and I pick a dungeon, say Lower Guck, for example, I've said this before, but you can go through Lower Guck as a player 1,000 times, and every time it'd be different, just because of the way the mobs interact with the environment and they interact with you. Some of this can be like caused by bugs and pathing issues, but that's kind of the fun. That's where a lot of the emergent gameplay comes from. Be like playing GTA and parking cars across the road to see what the AI does. That's where that kind of emergent gameplay comes from. Sometimes bugs and pathing errors and that kind of thing. But yeah, you can go through Dungeons and EverQuest, as I said, 1,000 times, and your experience will be different because of the way you interact with mobs and the environment, and the way mobs interact with you and the environment can be completely different. A mob might just suddenly decide to do something completely different you've never seen before, and it's like, wow, okay, that's amazing. And you just don't get those experiences in single player RPGs. You get some good ones, but I don't really think that they match up. And the other thing as well is, obviously, even though you're playing solo, you've still got the social part of that. So if you go to Lower Guck in EverQuest, or whatever your favourite dungeon is in your favourite MMO, there might be other players there. So then again, the whole experience changes again. What they're doing means that the mobs are behaving differently. And if you're passing them, or they're passing you, or you're around each other in the dungeon, everything's going to behave differently. The dungeon's going to behave differently, and the experience is going to be different. So even though you might be doing a solo dungeon crawl, the social aspect will still impact in a positive way, generally, as long as they're not being smegheads, your experience within the game. And I think that's a point that single player RPGs just don't really get close to. The other thing as well are just other things that people might enjoy in MMOs, like collecting mounts, so it's like activities that MMOs have, like dailies and weeklies and all that kind of stuff. I quite enjoy those. I know some people don't, but you'll generally find that single player RPGs just don't have that kind of thing. It's very story focused, like gathering and crafting. So there isn't a single player experience. There isn't a single player game that's really got the gathering. I love gathering in New World. It's my favourite game for gathering. There isn't a single player game that offers that experience. Crafting as well. You generally don't get anywhere near as deeper crafting systems in single player games as you do in MMOs. So there's a number of reasons why people might play solo. Some of them enforced, some of them by health or personality, but I think many of them are just because single player RPGs just don't give the same experience, or as good of an experience in certain gameplay areas. And I do find it weird when people kind of get upset or don't seem to understand why people play them solo. It's like you kind of get a lot of gatekeeping going on in that regard. I'm seeing it quite a lot in these classic MMOs that kind of want to be that are kind of trying to replicate the classic experience, almost trying to tell people this is what you've been missing, this is what you need in your lives again. It's weird because many of these games don't have many players at all, so I kind of do wonder who these players are. But of course, a lot of what is spoken about is incorrect. These even the granddaddies or the daddies of MMOs facilitated solo play. Ultima Online was a very, very soloable game. You could tame your own dragon, for example. If you were a high level bard, you could get dragons to fight against other dragons just from the power of your music. In EverQuest, there are classes that were designed for solo. If you go onto P99, you go onto the wiki, the official description of Necromancer is, works well alone, casts a lot of spells on itself, a lot of utility spells that other players other character classes can cast on other players. So that class was designed to be self-sufficient and solo. There are other classes as well that are very soloable. I don't think any of this I think this is by design. So even going back to those games, those early games, there was a solo ability to them that I don't think was just a completely random thing that people just discovered after they came out. I think that it was a purposeful thing, because I think that no matter how much these kind of gatekeeper MMO players kind of want to believe it, it's not just about the social aspect. It's not just about getting together with your friends and whatever. It's about whatever experience the person, the individual wants to have. That's what these games are all about. A sandbox game, if it's calling itself that, it's not just about grouping. A sandbox game should be about players being able to experiment and do whatever they want in the game in the way that they want. I'm not, I would never expect like a solo to be able to, solo raids and all that kind of stuff. That's just nonsense. But even the earliest MMOs purposely facilitated solo play, no matter what some of these players currently are trying to tell you. And just quickly on that subject, I do kind of find it quite odd, and I kind of wonder what sort of players these are. I kind of, when I listen to them talking, I kind of wonder if they ever play classic MMOs and they're just like, it's like a badge of honour that they haven't earned, if you know what I mean. Because they kind of talk about classic MMOs in a way that they just really weren't, and they'll say things like, well, this game is getting back to what MMOs used to be like, which would have included solo play and quests and stuff. So and lots of quality of life issues, quality of life things that these players kind of seem to deny. But anyway, getting back onto the solo side of things, I think that there are many reasons why a player might want to solo, and one of those is just for the enjoyment of some of the game mechanics in an MMO, and the way that other players can affect those, even if you're not in a group with them, that single player RPGs just simply don't give you. That's as simple as that, really. It's a good fun experience that you don't find anywhere else, even as a solo player. And I don't know why so many people seem to try to deny this fact. I'm not saying that these games weren't built around the social aspect, but they all purposely facilitated solo play because they were aware even back then that it's why would you, I know some games are trying to do it, why would you create a game that enforces a play style on a player, particularly a game where the survival of your game is based on people paying a monthly fee, for example? Why would you try to impose a gameplay mechanic on them, particularly one that wasn't even relevant like back in classic MMO eras? I don't know. Is it ego? Is it just not understanding what those games were trying to do back then completely? I'm not sure what it is, but anyway, as I said, a number of reasons why people may play an MMO solo, as I often do. And the way that I play MMOs has changed over the last couple of years. Partly it's to do with playing some of the newer MMOs. Newer MMOs for me anyway, so like Lost Ark, New World, that kind of stuff. I think the Asian MMOs particularly, I think, have got a lot to add. And what I like about the Asian MMOs is the account-wide stuff. And at first I thought to myself, oh, this is going to break my immersion. But actually when I thought about it, it makes perfect sense from an immersion and a role-playing point of view. So when I think of games that have got shared currency, so whenever you log in a character, whenever you log in your main character or an alt, they all share the same currency. The same currency is up on the screen. Makes perfect sense when you think about it. You could role-play your characters as being good friends or family members, sharing their money. Why would you not do that? Things like shared, I think Lost Ark's got a thing where your gathering skill is shared across your account. So when you log a character in, whatever character you log in, they've all got the same they've all got the same gathering skill basically. And if you log a character in and it increases the gathering skill, when you log another one in, it's still the same. I believe that's how it's working anyway. Again, from a role-playing point of view, an immersion point of view, you might initially think, oh, this is like totally breaking my immersion, but actually, well, not really. No, it's like, you could be a parent passing on your skills to a child, or you could be training them, for example. You don't have to go as far as having the same skill level. You could create an alt, and that alt could start off with a certain competency in a crafting or a gathering skill, or maybe they just gain it a lot quicker because your main character is kind of like a mentor type thing. When I think of games like Project Gorgon, Faction as well, if I create an alt, why can't I introduce that alt to the NPCs I've had to spend literally about 15 years grinding Faction with? and say, look, this is my friend or family member. You can rely on, you can trust them. So the NPC. So maybe with the NPC, you start off at a higher level from a faction point of view, or maybe you just gain faction quicker. Maybe you just got to complete a couple of quests for the NPC just to max out the faction, just so you're kind of doing something. But all of these things make perfect sense when you think about it from a role playing point of view. And and I've been thinking about it quite a lot, and it's something that I'd like to see Western MMOs kind of implement. I know they're not going to, because they want you to create a character, and then they want you to go back and create an alt and grind out exactly the same stuff you ground out with the first character. Because why wouldn't they want you to? Probably because their game's not good enough, or not good enough, got enough content to keep you playing naturally. They have to put up these these kind of like false barriers, these barriers, these roadblocks for you with progression, because they just don't have enough mojo or enough content. I think that's but it's something that I would like to see games take away from. I'd like to see Western MMOs take away from the Asian market. Other things as well, like this might surprise you, and I'm sure probably most of you will agree, because I know that many of you come to the channel from EverQuest P99. But even things like death penalties, I've kind of got to the point where I don't quite see what death penalties are bringing to games anymore. Back in the day, when you couldn't have a game open plus an internet tab at the same time. It was all very new. We didn't really know what we were doing. Going around Ultra Online or EverQuest for the first time was a mystery. Maybe something like the EverQuest death penalty had a point then. It kind of fitted in. Nowadays, I don't think it does. Whenever I've played P99 or I've watched it on video or streaming or whatever it may be, death penalties are generally... Players see them as an inconvenience now, and they do whatever they can to circumvent them in the most efficient way. Most players will log in a level 60 and trivialise the corpse recovery. Probably a cleric, which trivialises the XP loss. So all it's doing essentially is wasting your time. You might say that when Pantheon comes out, people won't know anything about it, so it'll all be new. That won't be the case. When Pantheon comes out, there'll be lots of players already know everything about it. That's the nature of the internet now. You have to remember that when I started playing MMOs, the internet connection wasn't good enough to play a game. But the internet connection wasn't even good enough to play the game properly, when I think about my experiences in Ultra Online. So tracking something on a website as well at the same time was just pretty impossible, I would say. And it just wasn't done, so everything was new. But nowadays, when a new MMO comes out, it's not really new because it's been in development for 10 years. It's had players playing it for all of that time. And obviously, as it gets closer to release, more and more people play it. So more and more people become aware of what to do, how to trivialise content, etc., etc. And, the things like death penalties and those kind of roadblocks just become an inconvenience rather than like something of a mystery that needs to be worked out. I've seen a couple of things I've seen people talk about with death penalties. The first one is that it makes the world feel more dangerous. It doesn't for me. I have to be honest. I don't feel any more or less danger based on the death penalty. I've been playing WoW Classic recently. In comparison to something like EverQuest P99, for example, the death penalty on World of Warcraft is almost trivial. But when I'm about to die in World of Warcraft, I don't go, no death penalty, who cares? I'll just die. I still think to myself, oh, bloody hell, I'm going to die. No, and I try and run away, and I try not to die. Because it's not the penalty, it's the dying is the penalty. When you die in a game, your progress has stopped at that point, and whatever you were trying to achieve has stopped, and you need to start it again. So if you're in a dungeon and you die, but you respawn with all your stuff like you would do in World of Warcraft, the penalty was the fact that whatever you were doing at the time, whether it was camping an item or farming XP or whatever it was, has stopped. That's the punishment. You've wasted that time that it takes you to get back to do what you were doing, whether it was camping or whatever it was. The death penalty should be the penalty. There shouldn't be any extras on top. And particularly, as I said, particularly nowadays, where I just don't think that they're as impactful as they were. Back in EverQuest in 1999, they were impactful. Nowadays, I don't think they are as impactful. Or if they are impactful, not in the same way. I don't think that we look at them in the same way. And as I said, you know, I've played 2 or 3 MMOs where the death penalty was pretty was pretty tame in comparison to P99, and not one of those times did I think, oh, it doesn't matter if I die. You know, I still didn't want to die because what I was doing was going to stop, and if it stops, that's the penalty. The other people talk about social interaction as well with regards to death penalties, people helping each other out, talking to people, that kind of stuff. Again, not now. As I said, you know, it won't. Most MMOs, when you're in a group, there's someone in there who will trivialise the corpse recovery for you on P99. So all it comes down to is just a matter of time, really, and that's really not. I don't think that was the. I'm pretty sure that many of these mechanics were put in place. I think that, again, it's the way we think. I think I see a lot of people think that things like death penalties in EverQuest, when they were originally put in, were that they kind of see them as some kind of champion, like some sort of champion of the genre, where this was put in there so that we could socially interact to get our corpses back, and it made us fear death. That's rubbish. Really, you know, these were put in there to be time blocks, to waste your time, to keep you in the game. That would have been the main design decision for these kind of things. And I think that we're kind of fooling ourselves to think that it was any other way. But anyway, yeah, death penalties. No, that'll be controversial. But that's just generally how I feel about them now. I just don't think. I think that they added something back in the day, but now I don't think so, because MMOs are not mysteries anymore. And from what I've seen on corpse recoveries on P99, it's not really a social event. You know, it's an annoyance until you get back to doing what you were going to do again. But anyway, that's just my opinion, and I'm sure many of you will differ. So getting on to MMOs in general now. Well, yes, I mean, I do find myself playing MMOs that I guess offer me... I try to play MMOs that offer me a combination of some quality of life stuff that I've spoken about, the new MMOs give, plus still a challenging environment. And that's the thing about MMOs. I don't understand when we talk about what we regard as challenging or not. So death penalties, time gates, grinding. That shouldn't be a challenge. That's not a challenge. That's a waste of time. We should be challenged by the environment, as we were in EverQuest when we went into a dungeon. Yeah, EverQuest had a death penalty. We've spoken about that, but there you go. But that's what the challenge should be more about. And the thing is also is that, like, from a grinding point of view, grinding is obviously a big part of MMOs, and I want to remove that. But the grinding needs to be fun. You know, like when you were, like, people talk about EverQuest being really grindy from a leveling point of view. And it was. I mean, I see people moaning about I've seen people moaning in WoW Classic about leveling speeds too slow. I mean, you need to go and play EverQuest on P99 because you've got it good. You really don't understand what slow leveling is. But yeah, but the thing is, in EverQuest is that EverQuest got the grinding, but the combat is so mechanically dense and tactical, and the encounters just allow for such emergent types of gameplay. That's why you don't mind the grind, because you never know what could happen. You know, it's chaos, but it's controlled chaos within how well you play your class and how well your group functions as a group. You know, and MMOs don't have that. You know, I look at some of these MMOs that are claiming to be classic now. You know, Project Gorgon, Embers Adrift been playing recently, Shroud of the Avatar, and a number of others. To me, they've taken the worst parts of MMOs from classic MMOs, and they've ignored everything else. So they just come across as really horrible, grindy mechanics that I just can't find it hard to get behind, really. Like, yeah, Project Gorgon's got a load of fantastic ideas, and it's one of the most original MMOs. Well, it's the most original MMO I played for many, many years. But it's behind lots of horrible grind. Embers Adrift. It's got nice paced combat as you expect in EverQuest. If you like EverQuest combat, you'll probably like Embers Adrift to a certain point, even though it's got a lot less functionality and in the classes, you know, with regards to the types of classes and what they can do. But the leveling experience is a horrible grind. Shroud of the Avatar, you know, made a massive mistake of probably allowing power to run away too much. So in a game that was supposed to be 5 episodes, I don't ever think it was I never ever thought they were going to get 5 episodes out of it when you look at how the game is now. But in episode 2, you know, the power creep in episode 2 was phenomenal. The amount of experience you had to earn to do some of the content in episode 2 was ridiculous, and it's because there was no control over over people's character progression in episode 1, so people could just get to wherever they wanted. And by the time they designed episode 2, players were so powerful they had to design it around those players, and everyone else was shafted essentially. So yeah, I'm looking at these games at the moment, and I'm not seeing anything particularly classic about them, apart from the fact that they're taking the most horrible grindy parts from MMOs from that era, and none of the good stuff, it feels like. And as for MMOs coming out, I mean, Pantheon, I don't know. You know, I just don't know. It looks like they're trying to recreate EverQuest for I guess a more modern audience. So it's still going to have some of the grindy elements from EverQuest. Some of the, I guess, what people would call non-quality of life mechanics. It's going to have some of those, but I think it's trying to modernise the combat a bit. I hope the key thing is I hope it keeps the emergent gameplay. That's the most important thing, and I hope that they're not worried about, as in EverQuest, you know, I hope they're not worried about people going, oh, I don't know, it's not fair. This class can solo this, blah blah blah. I hope they ignore all those whiners, because that's what EverQuest was all about. You know, it was about people finding out what they could do with their class and then doing it, not having, as long as they're not soloing raids, you know, they're not putting limitations on them. But I don't know. Ashes of Creation, again, I don't know. It looks amazing, but I think PvP will probably kill that game pretty fast when people realise that the criminal or corruption system, whatever it is, doesn't stop people from ganking them and harassing them. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm looking ahead and I'm thinking, well, like, what's next? You know, I'm kind of in a bit of an MMO, not a drought, but I've got loads of MMOs installed, and when I look at them, I've got the choice of going back and playing classic MMOs on an emulator, or I've kind of got the other end of the spectrum. And there's nothing, for me at the moment, there's nothing fulfilling that, what I'm looking for in the middle. You know, I want the difficulty of EverQuest combat, whatever it may be, but I want some of the quality of life issues that I'm seeing in some more modern MMOs. So what I find myself doing at the moment, essentially, is I'm playing a little bit of M's Adrift, although less and less. And I'm running around. I started on the fresh start servers on New World. Really enjoying that. I'm loving going around gathering again and seeing my skill go up. The actual quest has been changed. The main quest has been changed quite a lot. That's been enjoyable to go through. It's all new, so I haven't seen much of that. So that's really interesting. When I look at the other games that I've got installed, I don't know. I'm struggling. Like Final Fantasy 14. I've got a character up to like level 40, 45 or so, and I kind of stopped playing it, and I want to go back, but I'm struggling to find the enthusiasm. Guild Wars 2 I started on. I only played that a little bit back in the day, but again, I'm struggling to find reasons to go back and play it. Lost Ark, again, I haven't played for ages. The RuneScape games, I think, were probably the most interesting games that I've played recently, MMOs, and I do want to go back to them, but again, for some reason I'm struggling to find the enthusiasm to get in there. As for EverQuest on P99 and Alcabor, I don't know what to tell you, really. It's like sometimes I think to myself, I'm playing these MMOs that are claiming to be classic, but they're not. But I've got these amazing classic experiences sitting in front of me, so why don't I just go and play those? But when I log into them, like when I log into P99 recently, I'm struggling to stay logged in, and it's not because I don't like the game anymore. It's amazing, but I've played it for a long time, so I think I think that's kind of why a lot of people kind of pin their hopes on something like Pantheon, because you want a similar experience, but you want a different world, different lore. You want to have some surprises coming up, even if there will be a million guides on the internet the day the game goes live. So maybe that's what that is there. I'm not sure. All I can tell you is that personally, I'm in a bit of an MMO space. I'm in the middle. I'm stuck in that space in the middle where I'm looking to the left and the right, and there are things about MMOs that I like new world. So I log in and run around and do some gathering, but the rest of the game doesn't really keep me interested enough. And it's the same at the other end of the scale, really, where I'm logging into Embers Adrift and I'm kind of enjoying it to a point, but then the total lack of any fluff that the game has got just becomes, it just becomes pretty boring. So I log out. But there you go. That's it. I'm quite looking forward to Diablo 4, actually. I think what the answer might be, as long as they don't become too dumb, is that I'm interested to see some RPGs coming out in the future that implement some MMO aspects. They're not an MMO, but they implement some of the aspects. So Diablo Immortal did that. I actually quite enjoyed Diablo Immortal because it had a single player story running through it. I enjoyed the combat. It felt Diablo-y, but it did have some of those more MMO-esque mechanics in the game as well, which I quite liked. I'd like to see Diablo 4 have maybe like a hub where you can see other players doing stuff and whatnot. It depends on how that's balanced. I know that Diablo and many single player RPGs are supposed to be a single player experience in the sense that you're the hero, and that seeing other heroes around might water down your experience. But that's what I'm looking forward to in the near future, actually, more so than new MMOs. It's actually, can some of my favourite games of all time, so like, obviously some of these games not even introduction, but I'd like Diablo's coming out and that's going to have some MMO-y aspects. I think about other role-playing games, like can they do, not necessarily Elder Scrolls Online, but can they do another Elder Scrolls that might have some MMO-y aspects to it? These MMO aspects don't even really need to be socially driven. You don't have to see other players in the game. It might just incorporate some aspects of MMO design into a single player game, just maybe to keep you playing them longer, just adding content, that kind of thing. I don't know. I'm not sure what I mean, to be perfectly honest with you. I think playing Diablo Immortal, even though I know loads of people hated it for the monetization and it was bad, kind of showed me a way of playing an MMO, of playing a game that's traditionally single player, but implementing some multiplayer aspects for it to work. Things like I played a bit of Destiny 2 recently, and I quite like that. I quite like the way that you go off and do a mission on your own or in a group, depending on how you want to do it. But then when you come back to home base, there's a bit of a social thing going on where there are other players running around and whatnot. That was quite an interesting experience. But outside of that, I'm not sure what to tell you. As I said, I'm in that area, that grey space between MMOs, where I'm not exactly sure what I want, but what I do know is that there's a number of MMOs where there are aspects from each of them that I enjoy, but there isn't one that is keeping me playing it religiously at the moment. So yeah, that's it for me. I know some of the stuff I've probably said is going to be controversial, particularly about the death penalty, but I think we've reached a point where MMOs need a rebuff. They need a buff. They need to be buffed. they need some big buffs cast on them, whatever that may be. Maybe it's games like Pantheon. I don't know. To me, it feels like the game that the problem with these games is they're never bloody going to come out, are they? Like I look at Ashes of Creation and Pantheon, and they still look like years away. Like how can that still be a thing? How can they be relevant in another 3 or 4 years' time? I just don't see how it can happen, really. I know Star Citizen's been going for 10 years now, but Star Citizen genuinely looks like nothing else that I've ever seen. So I can understand why people, even whatever the problems are, I can understand why people are attracted to it. But with things like Pantheon, well, there are kind of games doing stuff very similar at the moment already. So will people keep on waiting? Anyway, I'm waffling now. Play Elden Ring. That's the thing. It's bloody amazing. Thanks for watching. I'll speak to you again soon.